Okay, 7:30. Can we begin with a short prayer? Glory be to the Father, and to the Son, and to the Holy Spirit, as it was in the beginning, is now, and ever shall be, world without end. Amen. The Father, Son, Holy Spirit. Amen. Good evening and welcome back from 2 weeks break. Next
Good
week,
evening, Father.
another break. Next week, we have our midterm break. This topic tonight, a new chapter, the ethics of virtue, Thomas Aquinas. Somebody is talking on the line. Please stop talking. You don't have to mute everybody. The ethics of virtue in Thomas Aquinas is a long chapter.
Excuse me, Father, there's an echo. There's an echo.
The echo is coming from me. Somebody using hand.
Christopher needs to mute himself.
Yeah, so please mute unless you have to talk or ask question. Is it okay now? Some people are oblivious.
Yes, thank you.
Some people are oblivious. They start talking when they are not muted to their wife and their kids. And then we are all hearing your stories, So please be careful. Yeah. Yeah. Okay. As I was saying, this topic is quite, this chapter is quite long. So we need 2 evenings. We'll do the first half tonight, and then we'll continue with the second half the week after you come back. The following week, not next week, the following week. Just a point on some of you writing emails to ask me questions.
Christopher, can you?
Please ask questions concerning the topic of the night. If you ask me questions that we have not yet covered, you're asking me a question on conscience, on sin. I can answer, but 2 hours of lecture, I'm trying to answer your question in a short email. It's not that easy. So ask the question of the day, the topic of the day, instead of asking questions that I will be covering down the road about conscience, about principles, about sin and whatever. And also, some people, especially one person, keep on asking questions that border on RCIA level. You ask questions about catechism of the church, about Jesus Christ and his mission. These are not moral theology. And after a while, I stop answering your question. If you ask those questions about the church, about Jesus Christ, maybe you want to attend RCIA again. You want to sign up for RCIA, and you can ask those questions about Jesus, about Mary, about, whatever, the church, and so on. Here, you try to ask me questions pertaining to the topic of the evening. Okay? If not, I have no time. I have no time to answer questions about church, about Jesus, about, and all that. Yeah. Strictly questions concerning the topic of the night. Okay, let's continue. Recommended readings, chapter 5 and 6 of the textbooks, or rather, I should put it compulsory reading. I don't know whether all of you have got your textbook. For those who have bought a textbook, you will find that it is so easy, isn't it? Immediately when you go back to read the textbook, you'll find that the whole lecture of the evening fall into place. It makes sense. Yeah, but without the textbook, you will miss certain points that I'm trying to make. Yeah, then you ask for notes and this and that and everything. Whatever I said can be found in the textbook. So chapter 5 and 6 of the textbooks, and 2 other recommended books. If you have the time or you have the passion for this topic, you can refer to Moral Virtues and the Theological Virtues, Romanus Serio, or one of my other books, Cardinal Virtues, Achieving Human Excellence. This book is out of stock, finished, completely sold out. Okay. Now, there are many ethical theories, but I'm just highlighting here the four main ethical theories. We have deontologism, we have virtue ethics, we have equity ethics, and we have consequentialism. Under deontologism, deon comes from the word deon. Deon in Greek means duty. So deontologism is duty-based ethics. It is about rules and regulations and commandments. What you should do, I tell you, you do. So the obligation is to obey the rules, the regulations, the commandments, and so on. And the actions or the decisions made are independent of the consequences. For example, honor your father and mother. Whether there are benefits for honoring your father or mother or not, whether you become richer or poorer, it does not matter. Actions are made independently of consequences. It is an obligation to honor your father and mother, so you do it, that's all. You don't say, what do I get from honoring my father? What do I get from honoring my parents? It is duty-based, okay? Then we have virtues, which we will be covering tonight and the following lecture. It is virtue-based. The emphasis is on character building. I'm not saying rules and regulations are not important, but rules and regulations have been shown to be insufficient in forming the character of a person. When there's a rule to bear, I do it. When there's no rule, I do whatever I like. So it's not good. Character building has to come from an interiorization of certain convictions. And all those values and convictions can only come about when we have good role models, people who can show us the right way in doing things and how the right way in doing things will bring about peace and harmony and happiness. So role models are important in the scheme of virtue ethics, which, as I mentioned before, good role models are sorely lacking. Even parents sometimes are not good role models. So role models are sorely lacking. Then we have equity theory. Equity is principle-based. And the overarching principle guiding all other principles must be primum non nocere. First, do no evil. Whether it's a principle of stewardship, the principle of common good, the principle of totality, whatever principle, it must come under this main guiding principle, primum non nocere. First, do no evil. And whatever principle that we are talking about, whether it's a principle of common good, of stewardship, or whatever, there must be four elements. If you can't find these four elements, that principle may not be a good principle. These four elements are freedom, autonomy. If you have a principle that actually restrict the autonomy, you don't allow people to make decisions on their own, no free choices, that's not a good principle. So there must be autonomy, justice, very important, non-maleficence, meaning it must not promote evil, and conversely, it's not just don't do evil. We want to ask whether there's beneficence. What good by applying this principle? So it's not just, oh, I've not done any evil. Yes, there's one part of it, but what good have you done? Under the equity ethical theory, it's quite complicated because you have to take the act, what the person is doing, then you have to take the agent, the one who's doing the act, and the consequences all together. You have to consider everything. So it makes this principle-based theory a little bit more complicated. Then we have consequentialism. Consequentialism is outcome-based. It is basically utilitarianism based on the philosophy of utilitarianism. And utilitarianism, they promote the greatest benefit or the greatest happiness for the greatest number of people. It is the result that matters. That's why it's called consequentialism. It's the result that matters. So under this ethical theory of consequentialism, bad acts are even permitted if the interests of the majority can override the interests of the minority, because it's the outcome that matters. If by killing this person, I can save 5 persons, let's do it. Because the greatest benefit for the greatest number of people. Utilitarianism. So that's immediately, I can tell you, condemned by the church. We do not allow consequentialism. Equity depends, but for virtues, ethics, and deontologism, no problem. The church promotes deontologism and virtue ethics. Equity depends. And consequentialism, based on the philosophy of utilitarianism, is not allowed by the church. Because when you allow that, everything can be a go-ahead. You can go for abortion. You can practice euthanasia. You say, I get rid of my sick father or mother. It brings the greatest happiness for the whole family. It brings the greatest benefit for my whole family. If not the whole family, we have to spend a lot of money, medical, and then we are psychologically affected, and so on and so forth. Because consequentialism, basing on the philosophy of utilitarianism, it is a result that matters. If you can bring the greatest happiness for the greatest number of people, go ahead. Even if that act is immoral, go ahead, because it's outcome-based. So I hope you are clear. Tonight, we are only concentrating on virtue ethics. There is a difference between value and virtues, because sometimes I hear people talk. They swing from one side to the other as if values and virtues are synonymous. They are not. They are not. So sometimes they say, oh, Asian values, Christian values. Then they switch to Asian virtues as if they're the same thing. They are not. So let's look at the differences. Values are community or religion-based. Virtues are universally valid. If you say a person needs to be kind, to be generous, every community will agree with you. Every religion will agree with you. No problem. But within that community, within that religion, they may have different priority based on certain values. So values and virtues are slightly different. Values refer usually to inordinate things, like a vase, a painting has value. You don't say this painting is very virtuous. It has value. Cryptocurrency has value. It has value in your eyes. But virtues usually refer to human conduct. Value is a belief system. It's a belief system. That's why we can talk about Confucianism values, Asian values, but virtues are habits. Virtues are habits which needs to be formed. Values are conferred. I see something, I am willing to pay $1 million for this piece of art. For another fella, he says, what nonsense are you buying? This painting, I don't even know what it means. I won't even pay $20 for it. So we confer a certain value on a certain article or certain building or certain article, whatever. You confer a value on it. Virtues are not conferred. Virtues are acquired. I cannot confer virtues on you. I cannot lay hands on you and say, now I confer on you the virtue of humility and generosity. If only it works like that, things would be much simpler. Virtues are not conferred, they are acquired. There are certain things known as wrong values. I put inverted commas because it's kind of misnomer, because value, we value something and that is wrong. It should be maybe disvalue, disvalue, wrong values. I'm telling you, you should not value that. Why do you value that? You should not. It's wrong, wrong values. But virtues are always right. I cannot question you. Why are you so humble? It's always right. Why are you so generous? When people are generous, we are angry. It's funny. Why are you so generous? Virtues are always right. Values determine worth. Virtues determines character. So most of it I've said already. So one may value a virtue without actually attaining it. So I value humility. Although I may not be that humble, but I value humility. I value humble people. I may not be very, say, generous, but I recognize generosity and I value generosity as a virtue. I may not have attained it, but I value it. A value can be decided upon through social agreement or certain contracts. We come together, we make a contract that this is our value, productivity, efficiency. We value that. That's why one may value something, another person may value another thing. Virtue, on the other hand, is universal. It cannot be decided through social agreement. A virtue is a virtue. Universal. Everybody who see a virtue will agree that it is a virtue. Virtues are not generated through a community, although they need a community to flourish. Virtues like goodness, kindness, faithfulness, humility, generosity. We need a community to flourish. I mean, you can be generous to yourself, but it sounds weird. You know, I'm very generous to myself. I'm very kind to myself. It sounds a bit, ego-centered. Virtues are always, meant for the other person. They need a community to flourish. It's not meant for yourself. Yeah. Value system can change. Virtues cannot change. The person can change, but I'm saying the virtue. You cannot be. Humility is good. And then 2 years later, oh, we made a mistake. Humility is bad. No such thing. But value system can change according to time, according to one's circumstances, priorities in life. Our value system change. Whether we are married, we are single, our value system can change. But virtues are unchangeable. Values are often subjective. I value this, you may not value that. While virtues are agreeable to everybody, precisely because virtues are objective. When we see somebody who is kind and good, we know immediately, everybody objective, we can see. Yeah. Today, in the sphere of education, character building is very important, very much emphasized. That's why we have to concentrate on character building for our children, for our students, for our seminarians. There are some seminarians who excel in their studies, but you can see through their character. They are not humble people, argumentative, very proud and arrogant, will never give way to others, cannot work with others, but they are excellent academically. Painfully, we have to ask them to leave the seminary. Character building is more important, and we emphasize that very much. That's why we come back to the idea of being and doing. Who you are is more important than what you do. Who you are. If who you are, your being, does not flow, or your doing does not flow from your being, then you are not an authentic person. You may be bluffing. You may be pretending. We have seen this term, agere sagito esse. Actions or activity flows from being. If not, then there is a dichotomy. People say, A, you are not who you are. Are you pretending? The forming of virtues, as I mentioned earlier, require good role models. Sometimes inevitably parents, children pick up very fast, so if our parents have to be super careful. They pick up what you do, they copy, they pick up what you say to other people. You have to be very aware of what you do and what you say in front of your children. One teacher told me, he said, "Father, I caught a student cheating in class for the test. So I have to call the mother in." The mother was a lawyer. So the teacher told the mother, "I caught your son cheating in a test exam." And the mother says, "What proof have you? How can you prove?" The teacher said, "Your son admitted. I caught and your son admitted." So he called the son up, and the son came in front of the teacher and the mother. And the mother scolded the son, "You stupid fool. Why did you admit? So you see, sometimes what kind of role models parents are projecting. That it's all right to cheat, all right to do anything wrong, never mind, but just don't get caught. Don't admit it even if you get caught. So that's the meaning, good role models. Sometimes parents are not good role models. Sometimes in the church, we don't get good role models. Sometimes in society, in politics, we don't get good role models among politicians, and so on and so forth. That's why there's this widespread renewal in the study of virtues, because of all this moral chaos. When there's rule, I follow. When there's no rule, it's the law of the fittest, the law of the strongest. So regulations, codes of conduct are all proving to be insufficient. When there's a rule, I pretend to be nice and obedient. When there's no rule, I'm an animal. So the approach of rules and laws to instill moral rightness has shown to be inadequate. Singapore, I think, is a country with most rules and laws. It should be crime-free. Everybody should be morally upright. If rules and laws can simply make a person to become a morally upright person, every Singaporean will be very morally upright. We have so many rules and regulations. But rules and regulations have shown to be inadequate in forming the character of a person. We need laws, as I said. We need laws, we need rules, we need regulation, because laws can play a part in forming the conscience and therefore the moral character of a person. But to equate following laws as a sign of moral excellence is a flawed conclusion. You are just good at following laws, but you're not really a virtuous person. You're just good at following laws. So we want to ask ourselves, are we a law-abiding person, or are we truly a virtuous person? If we take away all these rules and regulations and laws, will we still act the same way that we will act? A truly virtuous person will say, laws or no laws, rules or no rules, I will still do the right thing. If you want to cheat, if you want to be immoral, there's always a way for you to do so. Even you have the strictest law, people can still become corrupted. People can still cheat and embezzle money and commit all kinds of crimes and folly. But if you have integrity and you're a virtuous person, you know what is right and wrong. It's in you. You have interiorized all that, all those convictions. So laws alone is solely insufficient in moral formation, as can be seen now in the failure of laws and regulations in the religious, political, and corporate fields. So character building is fundamental in virtue ethics. While the rightness of an action, that means you have acted correctly, is only important as far as it has bearing on your overall character. So what? You got one time right, but you are basically a selfish person. You gave money once. That does not make you a generous person. We want to form the moral character. the rightness of an action is important as far as it proceeds from your character. If not, it is not real, it's not authentic. That is why we often, discover to our shock and dismay, the true character of a person can be very different from his public persona. Because this person was pretending and playing games all the time. A person who apparently has been doing all sorts of good works can eventually be found to be a cheater, a fraud, and an immoral person. Why? Because we have been concentrating on his actions. We have forgotten to look at the character. The character is all round, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, all round, all year round. You can see the character of a person. When you're in the company of a kind person, you know it. When you're in the company of a humble person, you know it. The person has interiorized that virtue. But if we are just looking at that person's action now and then, you can be led by the nose, because that person can be pretending, fraud, cheater. So when such a situation happens, we say that the person has a character flaw because his being is not authentic, even though his actions, his doing may appear to be correct. He gave money to the church. So we say, oh, he's so generous. But yeah, you don't know what he's doing behind. He's a big cheater. So don't just concentrate and look at the actions. Character is more important. If actions do not flow from identity, from character, we say that there is a dichotomy between the person's character and the person's actions. And therefore, in the words of Jesus, he's a hypocrite, pretending. That's why often in life we can be taken for a ride by people who pretend so well, only to find out they are not who they are. Why? Because their actions apparently seems to be correct. We are focusing too much on the actions. So therefore, it's important to get our identity right. And the actions will follow naturally. And those actions, you do not need to force those actions out to please people because people are looking. You will do it whether people are looking or not, whether there's a rule to bear upon you or not. Your actions will flow naturally. These are genuine actions, meaningful, because it flows from our identity. And I mentioned in the introductory lecture that we don't have too many identities in life. But those identities that we have in life, the few, we are asked to work hard on them and try to perfect those identities. These are the main identities, but there are others, I'm sure. Try to be a humane person. Discipleship in Christ, yes, is an identity. It's not for 1 day or 2 days. Everywhere I go, I carry that identity, that character with me. And people should be able to see my character from the actions flowing from my character. So a character, an identity, a being is enduring. Identity refers to who we are. as opposed to the roles, what we do. What we do, normally others can do also. But others, well, they are not priests. Others, they are not parents. They are not, disciple in Christ. Doesn't mean we talked about the last time, Christian intentionality. People can be kind and generous too. People can help the poor too. Yeah. That's just something they do. But I help the poor because that actions flow from my Christian intentionality. I'm a disciple. I'm a disciple of Jesus Christ. And what a priest does, most of the things a lay person can do also, except for a few things, like saying Mass and hearing confession. Most of the things we do each day can be done by the lay people. But they are not priests. I'm a priest. They're not. Why? I have their identity. Actions are sporadic by nature. It's done and it's gone. They come, they go, it takes place at a certain time, place, circumstances. On the other hand, identity is something that goes on, enduring and perduring. That's why you cannot have this identity one day and not have that identity the next day. Then you are faking. You are faking. That's why I say there's no part-time parents or priests or part-time disciples. You cannot be one day this and another day you are not that character. The Greek word for virtues is arete. Arete. And arete means excellence. And arete refers specifically to moral excellence. Arete refers to moral excellence. Today we use this word excellence in all kinds of situations. If you can work very hard, we say excellent. If you can paint very well, we say this piece of art, well, excellent. The artist, excellent. If you can sing well, we say excellent. That's not the real original meaning. The real meaning, arete, refers to moral excellence, not just any kind of excellence. Oh, you are doing well in your business, excellent. No, that's not arete. Oh, you can write so well, excellent writing. That's not arete. Arete concerns the human spirit, your character, moral excellence. Virtue impels us to do what is good, right, and honorable, regardless of whether there is a rule to bear upon our actions or not. If you are able to do that, then you have acquired a certain virtue, whatever it is. You do what is right and good and honorable, even when there's nobody forcing you to do that. There's no rule to bear upon you. The only law that governs us, perhaps, is the natural law implanted in our hearts. But this is not an external law, like written law, the law of the country or the law of your company compelling us to act in this way or that way. So this law, that's why I put inverted commas, is the natural moral law written in our hearts, telling us to do what is the right thing. What, in your opinion, are the most central virtues? It is not possible to find all virtues residing in one person. You must be God. You must be God. It's not possible to possess all virtues. You find every virtue that you can think of. Yes, you have it in this person. Not possible. Therefore, it is enough to possess the more important ones. In all, whether ethical or philosophical system, there is always a central virtue that is seen to contain or embody all other virtues. For example, Aquinas said the central virtue is prudence. If you have prudence, you'll do everything right. Socrates says it's wisdom. Plato says justice. Aristotle, the teacher of Aquinas, says prudence too. St. Augustine says the central virtue is love. It's strange, it's ironical. I mentioned before that St. Augustine is a rigorist. He's very strict. He's a rigorist. Yes, no, cannot, and all that. And yet his central virtue is love, which already shows us that you can be strict and yet be very loving. St. Augustine is a rigorist, very strict. This cannot, that cannot. Even have sex, you're not supposed to feel pleasurable. You're pleasurable, you go confession. It's a sin. For him, it's very strict. Sex is just procreation. You can't even, you should not feel pleasurable. It makes people feel guilty about it. It all came from St. Augustine. And yet, his guiding central virtue is love. What is the ethics of virtues concerned with? It concerns living a virtuous life, leading to happiness and good relationships. When you have happiness and good relationships, what do you get? You get stability and harmony, isn't it? For self, for family, for society, for the world. That's why we want to live correctly. You know what is the purpose of leading a virtuous life? It leads to stability, good relationships, happiness. The ethics of virtues focus on what sort of person I must be. We must constantly ask of ourselves this question. And even when you're raising children, when you're raising your kids, you should ask, what sort of person I want my child to grow up to be, rather than what I want my child to do. You know, a lot of children now, wow, they're very clever. Their heads are so big, but they have no hearts, you know. They have no hearts. They're not grateful. They are not appreciative. I've seen children like that. Parents give and give and give and give, and they take you for granted. You don't appreciate what you have done for them. You can turn around and say, but I didn't ask you to do it. Why should I thank you? You want to do it for me, you know? They're so ungrateful. Why? Because we have been focusing too much. What my child must do. Do well in exam. Do this, do that. And we have forgotten the character of the person. What sort of person I want my child to be, to become. That's why we have to move away from an act-centered morality to a more person-centered morality. So the ethics of virtues is concerned with the overall character of a person rather than the isolated individual acts that a person performs. Remember, we are doing ethics, not just any ethics, virtue ethics, but virtue ethics according to Thomas Aquinas. Now, if you look at the schema of Thomas Aquinas, Summa Theologia, Aquinas' treatment of virtues is preceded by his treatment of habits. Because St. Thomas says that it is not possible to understand virtues without first understanding habits. Because virtues are basically habits. Virtues are habits. So you want to understand what virtues are, start first by understanding what habits are. So St. Thomas says we need to form good habits in a person from a young age. Not that you cannot form good habits in your older age, but the older a person grows, it's harder to change the person's habit. Certain habits have set in. So we should try to form good habits from a young age. Why? Because virtues are habits. Good habits are virtues. Bad habits are vices. And Thomas says, what I'm saying are all taken from Thomas Aquinas. Good habits are virtues. Bad habits are vices. So we want to form good habits. Aquinas' idea of habits comes from a certain perception of human nature having the capacity to go both ways. You can develop real good habits, but you can also develop bad and evil habits. We have that potential to go both ways. In philosophy, Thomistic philosophy, which is basically Aristotelian philosophy, we have this concept of act and potency. Who you are now, but you can become. There's always the potential to become. So we can go both ways. Depends on how you form your habits. You can go both ways. Form the right habits and you achieve greatness. You form bad habits, laziness, don't want to work, you end up with a mediocre life. You form good habits, leading you to moral excellence. You form bad habits, this might bring moral decadence. And all the rest. We have that capacity to go both ways. This is the philosophy of Thomas Aquinas. From now on, from this slide on, you will see the numbering. 49, now we are doing 49. Then you see 50, 51. And following the numbering in his Summa Theologia, the first part of the second part, question 49. St. Thomas asked, what are habits? Habit is a stable quality that is not easily changed. I can see you doing that all the time. That's why it's a habit. If I see you helping people all the time, it's a good habit. If I see you very malicious and always selfish and taking things from people, you're always like that. That's a bad habit. Habit is a stable quality that is not easily changed. If it is easily changed, then I cannot call it habit. I mean, I'm giving you another example which is not moral, but whether it's moral or not, the idea of habit is the same. I see a person always digging nose. I see a person always biting nails. It's a bad habit, although there's no real morality in this case. But the person is always biting his nails. Yeah. You cannot be biting your nails just once a year. I see you constantly biting your nails. It is a stable quality which is not easily changed. Until something drastically happens, you might stop biting your nails. Therefore, it has a certain permanence. Habit is a stable quality. It has a certain permanence. It sticks to you. It has a certain permanence that disposes you for either good or bad. The Latin word for habit is habitus. Habitus embodies a definite ability for growth through activity. So how do you acquire a habit, whether a good habit or a bad habit? How do you acquire a habit? A habit is acquired through activity. Habits are formed through repeated acts. You don't form a habit by just one act. You do it today, you do it morning, afternoon, every day. Eventually, it becomes your second nature. You cannot do without it. It's part of you. Then we say, yeah, it has become your habit to do this or that. It's now your habit. So you can't form a habit by just doing one or two acts. It has to be repeated acts. We call it habituation. So St. Thomas is habitus, embodies a definite ability for growth through activity. You acquire a habit through activity. Now, it's all right to acquire a good habit is a virtue, a bad habit is a vice, but we want to, of course, acquire a good habit, virtue. It's all right to acquire a good habit through repeated acts. That's the way to do it, no other way. Do it again and again and again until it's second nature to you. But these acts must be done properly with interiorization. That means the person must interiorize. Why am I doing this? It must proceed from reason. That's why when we tell children to do certain things, explain to them why it needs to be done. And they will be convinced that it is a better way to do it than not to do it. It must proceed from reason. Now, these acts need not be identical. What is the meaning? For example, I want to acquire the good habit of generosity, the virtue of generosity. I can acquire the virtue of generosity by trying as and when I can to give some money to people who need, to give some money to the poor, less fortunate, or whoever asks of me, I give. That's a good habit. Eventually, I form a virtue. But my giving need not be identical. Every time I give, it must be $10. No. Sometimes I give $2, sometimes I give $50, sometimes I give $5. It need not be identical acts. That's the meaning. But it has to be done through activity, actions. But these acts need not be identical acts. You do not need to always give $10 each time people ask to be generous. No need. You want to acquire the virtue of generosity, you give. Sometimes more, sometimes less. You give. No need to be identical. But why do you give? You must understand. So the act of giving must proceed from reason. If you force somebody to give, then that act is done mechanically and even meaninglessly. That's why no point forcing somebody to do something that will not lead to an acquired virtue. The person is just simply forced to do something. He or she will never acquire the virtue. It has to be from within. I understand, why am I giving? I have to interiorize that habit, the good habit, the virtue of giving, of generosity. I'm just giving an example of generosity, it can be anything. But if you keep on forcing people, the person may even resent. Why are you forcing me to do this all the time? The person may resent you for forcing him to do certain acts. So it has to be interiorized. Acts done mechanically will not lead to an acquired virtue. There are two main classifications of habits according to Thomas Aquinas. Two main classifications. First, the entitative habit, and second, operative habit. Entitative habit is a habit that affects the possessor in himself, like fat, like skinny, like happy. Some people always have a joyous disposition, very positive. Some people always gloomy, like the world's going to end tomorrow, always so down. You look at them also, you feel down because, they are always so pessimistic. That is entitative. Why is it habit? Because you're always like that. People can see that you're always gloomy. If I see you gloomy one day and not gloomy another day, I cannot say that it is an entitative habit. In you, entitative. You can't be fat one day and skinny tomorrow. If you are fat today, you'll be fat tomorrow, I'm sure. Until you do something to become skinny. Same, if you are skinny today, you can't be fat tomorrow until you do something to be fat. It's easier to grow from fat to skinny than skinny to fat now. Because fat to skinny, now a lot of things to help you, right? Fat freezing, liposuction, you can become skinny in 1 week. But then if you are skinny, you want to become fat, no matter how you eat in a day, you can't be fat tomorrow. So these are qualities that affect you, the person. The other habit, St. Thomas called operative habit. It affects the possessor, the person, in his operation or activity. Now, in our moral theology, I'm not concerned whether you are fat or skinny. Okay, we are concerned with the operative habits, not the entitative habits. We are concerned with the operative habit. Question 52, Thomas talks about the increase of habits. A habit is said to increase inasmuch as the act becomes more frequent, more intense, more deep-seated. An act can become more frequent, you are doing it more frequent. An act can become more intense, or an act can become deep-seated, more deep-seated. So a habit can increase in 3 ways. Frequent. For example, you gamble. You started gambling once a year, now become once a month. Now you go MBS once a week. You see it's becoming more frequent. So your habit is increasing. You're gambling now from once a month to once a week, or even every day. Or drinking. You used to drink once a month with your friends. Now you are drinking every day. It's becoming more frequent. So your habit is said to increase if the act becomes more frequent. Your habit is said to increase also if the act becomes more intense. Now, you find not satisfactory to bet, $1 or $2. Each time you bet is $50, $100. Now the habit is getting intense. Or it's not enough to drink 1 can of beer. Now each time you drink is 3 or 4 bottles, getting more intense. A habit is said to increase as the act becomes more intense. And finally, deep-seated. Wow, this is like already that habit has stuck to you like a second nature. Addiction, unable to do without it. Beyond reasoning. So you see, how habit increase. In 53, Thomas talks about the weakening of habits. Just as habits can increase through frequency, intensity, and deep-seatedness, habits can also be weakened. Habits can be weakened to the point of being destroyed even through neglect or decreasing its frequency and intensity. You can weaken or even destroy that habits. Remember, now I'm not just talking about bad habits or good habits, it's both. St. Thomas' definition of habits, a stable quality, a permanence, a certain permanence. So don't, because I mentioned drinking and gambling, but it can be generosity, for example. If you stop giving and you become, more selfish, then eventually you come to a point where your virtue of generosity is so weakened or even destroyed. So through neglect or through decreasing its frequency and intensity. So a habit, which can be bad or good, of course, bad habits are vices, good habits are virtues. Habits can go both ways. Habits of the first principle cannot be destroyed because first principles are self-evident. The rest of the habits can be weakened and even destroyed. Habits of the first principle, in philosophy, we say habits of the first principle cannot be destroyed because they are self-evident. I know I exist. You cannot say, am I existing? How do I know I existing? That's the problem of Descartes. I think, therefore I am. He was questioning, how do I know I exist? Then he said, hey, I'm thinking, therefore I cannot not exist. If I don't exist, I won't be thinking. So he says, I think, therefore I am. First principles cannot be destroyed. You exist means you exist. You cannot doubt your own existence, or cause and effect, or contradiction. These are first principles. You cannot have and don't have. You cannot know and don't know at the same time. Do you know what time is it now? I know, but I don't know. Are you trying to be funny? You're defying the principle of contradiction. So first principles cannot be destroyed. Habits are the first principle. The rest can be destroyed. 55, 56. Now, St. Thomas now, after having explained habits, move on to virtues. And St. Thomas says, the whole of moral matters can be reduced to the consideration of virtues. Just as we have seen the Latin word for habits, habitus, now the Latin word for virtue is veritus. And veritus is a word that means strength and power. virtus, vince, vincere, conquer, victor, vincere, virtus. There are many virtues. But there are not many virtuous person around. Every virtue contributes to make a person more virtuous, definitely. But one has become virtuous only when you have interiorized a virtue fully. Again, I use the example of generosity. Sometimes, people tell me and whisper to my ear when I was parish priest in the parishes, Father, that man is very generous. I say, what? Why do you say that? I always see him put $1,000 when the wardens come around. I always see him put $1,000, the purple one, $1,000. You have seen the man put $1,000 into the church donation box or the collection box. That's an act of generosity. He goes out and he meets somebody outside who needs money, or a relative in dire situation coming to him for help. He says, no, I will not help you. Is he generous to the poor? No. Is he generous to his own siblings? No. Is he generous to the church? Yes. Has he acquired the virtue of generosity? I don't know. You say he's a generous person because you have seen him give $100 or $1,000 to the church. The virtue of generosity has been fully acquired or possessed only if one is capable of giving always, anytime, anyone. If you see people, what kind of people then you give? When you give, what you give, then you have not really acquired the virtue of generosity, because you are only generous sometimes. You are only generous to some people. For whatever reason, I don't know. You think you give $1,000 to the church, God will bless your business. God will heal you of your cancer. So you make a pledge. But you go out, you are stingy like mad to other people who need help. And so this person whispered in my ears, Father, he's a very generous person because he gave big donation to the church. I don't know. I don't know. The person will know whether you have truly acquired the virtue of generosity. Is there a point in being virtuous? Does being good and virtuous pay? Bad people seems to prosper. I always hear people say, so why be good? Vices are, so fun. Vices, so fun. Virtues, not only boring. Being virtuous is so stressful. Is it true? Sounds like true, but it is a fallacy. It's a fallacy. Why is a fallacy? Because this kind of mindset that vices are fun, virtues are boring, being good does not pay, they are not based on objective morality, but on some feel-good experiences. You did something bad, and then you feel good about it. And so therefore you conclude, being good does not pay, being bad pays, because I do bad things, I feel good. The few stories of how you come across where bad people prosper cannot be compared to the many, many people who found peace, arete, and harmony in their lives through virtuous living. We only hearsay, anecdotal, just hearsay of certain bad people who prosper. But even when you say they prosper, what do you mean? You are only looking at maybe their house and their cars or their bank accounts. They have not one day of peace. They are afraid people will kill them. They are so afraid of the security of the family. They have bad health. They don't tell you. They are suffering in many other ways. But you only see, the external that makes you feel good, big house, big car. And you say bad people prosper. Sounds like truth, but it is a fallacy. The benefits of sin, benefits, inverted comma, are always temporary and fleeting. The bad things you do, you feel good for a while. Surely you feel pleasurable and good for a while, temporary and fleeting. In the end, you suffer. Advantages of being virtuous. Don't you think that if you are virtuous, you're more likely to succeed in business because you're honest, you're frank, you're transparent. You're more likely to succeed in friendship, in marriage, in everything, in family life. Honesty, courage, perseverance, humility. You can go on, all the virtues. Makes you a likable person. Makes you easier to relate to. What can unforgiveness, dishonesty, unfaithfulness, all that do for a person? You just make people hate you. You just create brokenness in your life, in your family. I'm just mentioning a few bad things here. The list can go on. What can all these things do for you? So don't say bad people prosper. It sounds like it's the truth, but it's a fallacy. Okay, we stop here for a short break. They will feel out of place in the office if everybody is doing this and this person insists on doing something else different from the rest. Yeah. But you can take the risk and do it shortcut and tell that person off. But you have to accept what comes next. You may not want to talk to you ever. Good examples, role modeling is central in this virtue ethics of Thomas Aquinas. You see, I mean, parents can scold and scold and scold. Yeah. Sometimes it just doesn't work. But if they see mommy, daddy doing it, or everybody at home doing it, they will just fall in line and do it. They won't say, why should I do it? Yeah, everybody is doing it. But if you use the hard way, scold and tell them, yeah. I'm not saying 100% won't work, but most of the time, they resent you. Yeah.
It's just like you're holding the handphone and you tell your child, hey, don't play on the handphone.
Yeah.
Something like
Or
that.
the way we treat our own parents.
Yeah.
Then we expect respect from our children. But they can turn out and say, look at yourself, I've heard this, these are not just my imagination. They say, you treat mama like that, and you want me to treat you like that. You treat Kong Kong like that. You call Kong Kong by name. You call mama Hangku, Lao Hangku, old tortoise. So they learn from us. You call your own parents by terrible nicknames. And I am supposed to address you and, bow my head to you. You don't even honor your own mother. Okay, let's continue because we have only about 40 minutes. There are two classifications of virtues, the theological virtues and the cardinal virtues. The theological virtues are infused. They are infused into you, faith, hope, and charity. Of course, infused doesn't mean, again, automatic. St. Thomas will tell you that even though they're infused, they can be corrupted by sin. But I'm not interested here in the theological virtues. You study the theological virtues under dogmatic, is moral. So moral, I'm more interested in the cardinal virtues, which are acquired. You have to acquire them. No shortcut. How do we acquire them? Habits. Forming good habits. Good habits are virtues. Bad habits are vices. So we will not be concerned with the theological virtues of faith, hope, and charity, but we will be looking at the cardinal virtues, which are acquired virtues. And these 4 cardinal virtues are prudence, justice, fortitude, and temperance. If you go to the CCC, the Catechism of the Catholic Church, in those numbers, you will have the whole section explaining the cardinal virtues. So if you have the time, just go and read the CCC in those numbers. There are only 4 numbers there. 4 virtues play a central role in our lives. And accordingly, they are called cardinal. Cardinal means main one, the main ones. And all other virtues are grouped around these 4 cardinal virtues. All other virtues are grouped around these 4 cardinal virtues of prudence, justice, fortitude, and temperance. Aquinas says that the cardinal virtues may also be called principal virtues because all other virtues hinge on these 4, can be derived from this 4, and can be reduced to this 4. That's why they are called cardinal. The main ones, cardinal. Aquinas says the cardinal virtues may also be called social virtues because you need those virtues, whether kindness or generosity or whatever, humility and whatever, you need all those virtues to live rightly with others, to live rightly in community, in society. So it can be called social virtues. They can also be called, the 4 cardinals, perfecting virtues, because they assist a person to perfect his or her character. It forms your character, your identity. And St. Thomas, thirdly, says that the 4 cardinal virtues can also be known as exemplar virtues. Because we aim, our life, we aim for that, to attain that, to acquire that. You can find the cardinal virtues already discussed by Plato in his writing Republic, or Aristotle in his writing the Nicomachean Ethics. And of course, Thomas Aquinas took much from Aristotle and incorporated it into his own writings, his own teachings on the 4 cardinal virtues. Now, the 4 cardinal virtues are like a template that is needed to mold the character of a person. They are like templates. And only Aquinas can do this. You don't ask me why. I'm using the method, and I'm using his teaching here. Aquinas cut each of the virtue up into 3 parts. So he will take, for example, prudence, and he will cut prudence up into parts. For us, prudence is prudence, that's all. But he will take prudence, and then he discussed the integral parts of prudence. Then he went on to discuss the subjective parts of prudence. And finally, he talks about the potential parts of prudence. Or for justice, for that matter, he will talk about the integral parts of justice, then the subjective potential parts of justice. So for each virtue, cardinal virtue, St. Thomas divided that virtue into three parts: integral, subjective, and potential. Now, what are the integral parts? The integral parts of the virtue are those elements which must come together for that virtue to function properly. And he gives the example of a house. A house must have a door, must have a window, a roof, a floor. All these are integral to make a house. If you have a house without a roof, that house is not integral, it's not whole. One part is missing, it's not whole. If you have a house that has no doors, the house is not integral, it's not whole. Something is missing. He gives the example of a house. The same goes for a virtue. There are certain integral parts that goes to make a virtue. If one part is missing, then that virtue is not whole. You have not yet fully acquired that virtue. You may have acquired part of that virtue, but not the whole of that virtue. That's called the integral parts. Okay? Then we have the subjective parts of a cardinal virtue. The subjective parts of a virtue, whatever it is, prudence or temperance or justice, the subjective parts of a virtue are species of that virtue, species. A person who has acquired a subjective part has almost acquired the cardinal virtue, almost, but not yet still. You have only acquired a shade of it, a species of it. So I can acquire a shade, a species of justice. Another person may have acquired another species of justice, another shade of justice. This is called subjective. For you, subjective yourself, and for me, I've acquired another shade of it. Then we have the potential parts of a cardinal virtue. The potential parts of the virtue are those parts that have something in common with that virtue and yet are different. The potential parts of the virtue, say virtue of prudence, are those parts that have something in common with prudence and yet they are not exactly prudence. The potential parts refer to those virtues that are similar to the whole of the cardinal virtue. For example, justice. It resembles the whole of the cardinal virtue of justice, except that not all the integral parts have yet been acquired. It has the potential to become a full cardinal virtue, a full prudence virtue, a full justice virtue. But now it is still at the potential parts level. So he divides, Thomas Aquinas divide a virtue, say prudence, into integral parts, subjective parts, and potential parts. You have to remember this, that is important. So according to Aquinas, which is the most central, which is the most pivotal of the four cardinal virtues? I've mentioned just now, for him, prudence. Like Aristotle, prudence. So for Aquinas, out of the four cardinal virtues, in fact, out of all the virtues, prudence is the most central. Why? In question 60 and 61, he says this: prudence provides the wisdom, the discernment, and the right judgment about what needs to be done. In life, if only we can do the right things always, isn't it? There won't be problem. There won't be brokenness. There won't be crime. There won't be abuse. There won't be trouble, marriage, family, community. There won't be war. Prudence provides the wisdom, the discernment, and the right judgment about what needs to be done. St. Thomas says that there's no possibility of virtues. That means virtue cannot exist without the guidance of prudence. When you have a virtue, you must have prudence next to it. Prudence guides all virtues. Prudence is the moral skill to know what needs to be done in your situation. So you have a virtue, whatever it is, generosity. It can be anything. I'm just mentioning because we've used this example. So let's continue with generosity. Let's say you want to exercise the virtue of generosity. Without prudence, your generosity can't even work. Every virtue must be accompanied by prudence. Prudence is the moral skill to know what needs to be done. So you cannot talk about virtues without the guidance of prudence. You want to be generous. That's good. The virtue of generosity. Your brother who is a drunkard comes to you. You know, you give him money, he will go and drink. He's a drunkard. But you are a generous person. And you know your brother is a drunkard. Do you still want to be generous with your brother? Do you still want to give money to your brother? Prudence will come in and tell you, don't give money. Maybe try to pay his house bill. Maybe hand the money to the wife for marketing expenses. Maybe try to pay the school fees of the children, but never give money to your brother. It does not mean you are not generous to your brother. Prudence is guiding your generosity. You understand what I'm trying to say now, that there's no possibility of virtues without the guidance of prudence. Prudence will guide how much you give, where, how, who. It will guide you. It's a moral skill to know what needs to be done in a particular situation. You are still generous, but prudence will come in to guide you in your generosity, how you should express, how you should show your generosity towards your brother. Definitely not by giving him cash because he will go and drink. Aquinas described prudence as recta ratio agibilium. Recta ratio agibilium means actions according to right reason. I have to emphasize right, because some people have reason, but their reason are wrong. Prudence means actions according to right reason. We all have reason, but some people, they can't reason properly. So they act on wrong reasoning. Prudence is about right reason. Prudence disposes one's practical reason to discern the good in every situation. So what is the good here? And second, how am I to accomplish this good? What are the means that I should choose to accomplish this good? So for the same example of your brother is a drunkard, discern the good in that situation. The good is the family needs to be taken care of. So I need to be generous. Choose the means. I will give money, I will buy food for the family, I will pay the bills because it's the good of the family, my brother's family. I choose the right means to accomplish this good. So that's prudence. Not just knowing the good, but knowing how to go about accomplishing the good. Choose the right means. If you choose the wrong means, then you don't accomplish anything. So sometimes it's not just knowing what is good, but how to accomplish that good in itself requires also prudence, choosing the right means. Thomas Aquinas says that prudence can be developed through teaching, through good role models, but most of all, prudence must be developed through experience. Aristotle says that experience is the best teacher of prudence, which young people don't have. That's why sometimes the old people talk to the young people, they say, don't teach your father how to suck egg. I have eaten more salt than you have eaten rice. Our parents always tell us that. I've eaten more salt than you have eaten rice. You don't have that experience yet. Experience will teach you how to be prudent. And the young don't have experience. Do you want to have a bishop who is 25 years old? You will say, no. Why no? You will say, too young. Even a bishop 30 years old, you say, no, too young. No experience yet, too young. When they are too young, they have not seen life. They have not gone through certain experiences in life. So they don't have that prudence. They don't have that wisdom, that prudence to make right decision according to right reason. It is the moral skill to guide all other virtues, which I've mentioned, and it is difficult to discern the presence or the absence of prudence until it accompanies another virtue. Then you can see prudence at work. It is also that virtue, prudence is that virtue, which allows us to judge what is right and wrong in a given situation and assists us to search for what he calls, Aquinas calls, the virtuous mean. The virtuous mean. Without that virtuous mean, prudence helps us to look for that virtuous mean. Without that virtuous mean, we can become extremists. We can go both extreme. Some examples, you can put another 20, but I'm just showing a few. On one end, you have cowardice. Person is always so coward. On the other end, you want a person so reckless, he wants to be hero. He has to jump from 14th floor to save somebody. Very reckless. You see somebody drowning and he jump into the water to save, but he can't swim himself. So prudence will establish the mean. which is courage. On one hand, you have person who is a miser, miserly, everything don't want to spend. On the other hand, you have spendthrift. Prudence will adjust and help this person to be frugal. Spend when you need to spend. Don't waste money. On one hand, you have timidity, so shy. Sometimes we mistake shyness for humility. Oh, I don't want, no, I don't want. It's not humility, it's timidity. On the other end, the other extreme, you have pride and arrogance. The mean between timidity and arrogance is humility. The mean between pettiness and extravagance is being magnanimous. I'm just showing a few, but you can go on. So what I'm trying to establish here is that the prudence help us to find the mean. Prudence allow us to search for the mean so that we will not go extreme. Now we are starting on the first cardinal virtue of prudence. And in this virtue of prudence, St. Thomas lists 8 integral parts, 4 subjective parts, and 3 potential parts. In the exam, I will ask this, but don't worry about the numbers, because I will ask you to explain the integral parts of, then I will tell you this. So you don't have to remember 8 and 4. I'm not interested in all this, memory work, 8, 4, 3, and all that. If I want you to explain the 4 subjective parts, maybe I want you to explain 2, then I will give you the name of the 2 and ask you to explain. So don't worry too much about the numbers. But I have to give you the numbers because that's how Aquinas has listed them. So let's look first at the 8 integral parts of prudence. Number 1, the first integral parts of prudence, St. Thomas says, remember the past. Second, have the right understanding of what is involved. Third, be prepared to learn from others. Fourth, be capable of making comparisons. Fifth, be reasonable. Sixth, it's important to have foresight. 7, always take account of circumstances. And 8, exercise caution in whatever you do. These are the 8 integral parts of prudence. Okay, remember the past. First one. 8 integral parts of prudence. We are looking at the first integral part of prudence. Aquinas says, remember the past. Why? History is the best teacher. A prudent person always try to recall what has happened. And if it is good, we do it again. If it's bad, don't repeat the mistake. Don't repeat the mistake. Then you're not very prudent. Remember the past. Whether it is success or failure, remembering the past serves as a guide for the future. This can apply to anything. Work, business, any endeavor, your relationship, your marriage, your family life. What broke your first relationship? Now don't do it again. Now you have a new girlfriend. Don't repeat the same mistake. Why your business went bust? Now you learn. Don't repeat the mistake. It can be good, it can be bad, success or failure. If it's success, we replicate it, we improve on it. Always remember the past. That's how you build prudence. Those who forget their past are prone to make the same mistake. Stupid, and stupidity has no cure. Two sons of an alcoholic father. One had to struggle through life as a drunkard, and the other became a successful businessman. When asked, "Why are you the way you are?" both answered, "My father was an alcoholic." For good or for bad. In our spiritual life too, I always hear people say, forgive and forget. No. Forgive and don't forget. Because when you forget, you are going to repeat the same mistake. You know a person don't like that, and you did that to him. He was angry, forgiven. Years later, months later, you do the same thing again, knowing that the person don't like him. If I know the person don't like whatever I'm doing, whatever I'm saying, sensitive in certain ways, then I don't do it. Prudence will tell me, don't do it again. So forgive, but don't forget. Remember how our sins, how our actions have caused troubles for other people, but even for ourselves, but usually for other people. How our sins have messed up the lives of our children, mess up our marriage. And don't do it again. If you forget, you're going to do it again. Prudence is remembering the past. Also remember the kindness and goodness shown to us. Ungrateful people are those who have forgotten the kindness of others. Take people for granted. Remember the past. You know why we have retreats? I don't know why people attend retreats, to feel high or whatever. Sometimes they attend 3-4 retreats in a year. We priests only attend 1 retreat a year. Sometimes I see people attending so many retreats in a year. A retreat must be an anchor. During a retreat, there must be an experience of God. And then it anchors you for that year. Good enough. So whenever throughout the course of the year, if anything happens, you look back to that anchor point. You recall your retreat, how God was present there. God is also present today, the same God. How God has spoken to you, God will speak to you again. And then anchor your faith. When you're in trouble, some people will say, "Oh, God has abandoned me." But then God was present. So strongly I felt his presence at the retreat. So if God is present then, God is present now. It's an anchor. Remember the past. Second integral part of prudence, having the right understanding of what is involved. Do not make decisions if you do not know the detail. If you do not comprehend an issue completely, then hold on your decision. Prudence will tell you that. If you try to make decisions without knowing what is involved, you are imprudent, we say. We are imprudent. And again, this principle can be applied to any other areas of life. Medical issues, making investment. You don't know what is involved. You want to throw all your money into this investment. You are not very prudent. This is not a prudent decision. Do you know what this operation, this medical procedure is all about? And the doctor asks you to sign, just sign. Do you know what it involves? So don't sign when you don't know. It's an imprudent act. Do not act, do not decide if you do not know enough. If you do not have the right understanding, St. Thomas says. So know what is involved, meaning you should know if I do this, what will happen? If I do that, what will happen? You must know the cause and the effects. If you are not sure, or worse, if you do not know what to do, refrain from getting involved, refrain from making decisions so quickly, because harm, you may bring harm and danger. And some things, once you do, once you decide, almost impossible to reverse. Your decision is permanent. Damage is permanent too. No turning back. So you're not very prudent if you make a decision without knowing the cause and effects, what is involved. If you ask me, do I want to take my TV apart if it's spoiled to repair it myself? I would say no. Because after I take all the parts apart, I can't put it back because I'm not a technician. Do you want to repair your car when it stalls? No, I won't want. Unless I'm a mechanic. I'm not. You know, in medical procedure, there's this principle. We always invoke this principle called the principle of informed consent. The principle of informed consent basically assumes that you know what you are signing. You have the right understanding of what is involved. I disclose to you, you are like that, you are like that, this is your prognosis. Do you understand? The person comprehends information. If you don't understand, tell the doctor, what jargon are you using? You know, sometimes we like to look intelligent, and the doctor uses, fantastic, bombastic medical terms, and we nod our head as if we understand all those big medical terms. So this is one of those principles which we will look at under the topic of principles. I'm trying to just explain to you using the principle of informed consent, which I will explain in 2 or 3 chapters from now in detail, that you need to know what is involved before giving your full consent, informed consent. Number 3, the third integral part of prudence, be prepared to learn from others, because no one knows everything. We cannot know everything. St. Thomas says it's impossible. Therefore, be teachable. You want to become a prudent person, be teachable. And you know some people are unteachable. You tell them, they argue with you. They think you are smarter than them. They argue with you. If you are a mechanic and you want to repair my car, I will let you, I won't argue with you. If you are a doctor and you tell me certain medical terms, I will try to comprehend, but I won't argue with you. I will say, explain more. If you are a scientist and you tell me something about science, I will take your word for it. I won't argue with you because I'm not a scientist. If I am a theologian and I tell you something, and you know nothing about theology and you still want to argue with me, that's unteachable. That's unteachable. And some people are unteachable. They just want to prove that they know a lot, they're very clever, or they read, or whatever lah. And you tell them cannot, this is wrong. They still want to argue with, they are unteachable. When you're unteachable, then you cannot acquire prudence, because learning from others is one of the integral parts of prudence, to become a prudent person. You know, sometimes in confession, people come and make their confession. Bless me, Father, for I have sinned. I want to confess that I did not attend Mass on Good Friday. So number one, I have to correct them and say on Good Friday, there is no Mass. Only the Passion service. No, I miss Mass. They will insist, you know. You tell them, no, there's no Mass. No, I miss Mass. Okay, lah, you miss Mass. Second, I have to tell them, Good Friday is not a day of obligation. Or for that matter, Ash Wednesday. After Ash Wednesday, a lot of confession. People come and confess, oh, I miss Ash Wednesday Mass. And we have to tell them, Ash Wednesday is not a day of obligation. No, it is. No, it's not. No, it is. For you, it is. Yeah. Unteachable. I don't argue with it. It's too tired to argue with it. Yeah. They're unteachable. Yeah. Some people are. When you are unteachable, then you are not very prudent. Your learning stops there. Be diligent to find out whatever needs to be found out first before acting. Be open to new ideas. Be humble. Consult people who know. Be prepared to learn from others. You know, St. Thomas is not very difficult. Of course, I'm making it very simple for you lah. If you read Summa Theologia, it's not that simple lah. I'm already trying to make it simple for everybody. But it's not that difficult if you understand his teaching. Yeah? Be capable of making comparison. St. Thomas is not asking you to make comparison so that you become angry with God, jealous about other people, their bigger cars. Why I have small car, the bigger house, I only a 3-room flat. It's not comparison to make you frustrated and angry. A prudent person makes comparison to enable the best possible decision and outcome. I give you an example. You walk into a shopping center, you want to buy a television, and then you want to buy a 60-inch television. You walk into the first store, first shop, and you saw this television, 60-inch, exactly what you want, and it says $1,000, you buy it. Then after walking down another 3 shops, you found the same TV for $800. Stupid you, because you don't want to compare. You make a, rash decision to buy just like that without comparing. So that is the meaning of be capable of making comparison. Same as doctors. You compare, nothing wrong. We always choose the best doctor, second opinion. You don't just go to a doctor you don't know, you've never heard of him. We compare. We gather data. This doctor is more experienced, better, and this and that is cheaper, and so on and so forth. You make comparisons in that sense so as to enable the best possible decision or outcome. That is the meaning. Don't be silly to do things, to buy things, to decide without first making comparison. Okay, I will stop here. I tell you, this is a long topic. We're only number 4 integral parts. I have 4 more, and then we go to the subjective potential, and we're only talking about prudence. Then we have to go to justice and temperance and all that, and we repeat again integral, subjective, and potential. Okay, we have 5-6 minutes left. We'll stop here. Any question? We'll continue next week, the 5th integral, the week after next. We'll continue the 5th integral part of prudence, be reasonable. But you can have a sneak preview of what I'm going to say by reading the textbook. So any question for tonight's lecture, I don't think is that difficult to understand. It's one of the easiest, in fact, easiest topic. Some chapters are drier, some chapters are easy, some chapters are more pastoral, especially the 10 Commandments. Some chapters are more spiritual. It's a combination. So virtues are one of those chapters are easy to understand. Yeah. Any question anyway?
Father, it's Michelle here. I'm
Yes.
just wondering if you can explain the difference between prudence and wisdom. They seem quite similar.
Yes, they are quite similar. Yeah. Wisdom in the teaching of the church is a gift, a gift of wisdom. It's a gift of wisdom, the Holy Spirit. Yeah, here is we are talking about acquiring it.
Oh,
You have to do something. You have to do something to acquire it. But it's similar, I should say it's similar. But in scripture, one is acquired, one is infused. You ask the Holy Spirit to give you the gift of wisdom. Yeah. But I can't give you the gift of prudence. It comes to experience. Yeah. Okay, any other question?
Hi, Father.
Yes.
Can you go back one slide, number 4? Yeah, I want to ask this. Okay, I'll give a scenario. I belong to a church. I attend the mass, and the priest homily is going round and round, and I'm not able to connect. If I choose to go church visiting to look for a priest that I'm able to connect in terms of my spirituality to appreciate the homily, am I practicing prudence in this point number 4?
Definitely.
Capable of making comparison.
Yes,
Am I right?
definitely. But I mean, you know, I
You know what I mean, right?
I know what you mean. I mean, some priests are better preachers than others, but the preaching, the homily is only one part of the Eucharist lah. We want definitely to get the most out of the homily lah. But the Eucharist is bigger than the priest's homily lah. We go there to encounter God in many other ways, through the community, through the singing. We lift up our minds through through the hymns, and we receive Jesus, the communion. So it's a whole thing. But definitely, if you want to go to another church where the homilies are better, it's a prudent thing, definitely. But I don't want to say that, I encourage everybody to run away from their church because the priest there cannot, preach properly. I mean, if I'm in India, I mean, there's no way for me to understand Indian. I still attend Tamil Mass. I can still attend Mandarin Mass. I don't understand a word at all, but doesn't matter because I know I'm going there to receive Jesus and encounter God. So depends on how you look at things lah. So it's definitely all right if you compare churches. Yeah. So sometimes a priest who is strong in preaching, he's bad in other things. Another priest is very good in sacrament, visiting hospital. You call him, he'll be there in a jeep. Yeah, he's very good. He'll fly there to hospital to annoy you or your parents, but he can't preach. So that's the thing. You say you can't have everything in one priest. Yeah.
Thank you.
So, but you're entitled to, really, you're entitled to compare which church you should go to derive the greatest spiritual gain. Definitely. Yeah.
Thank you, Father.